Hi, Maestro Johan de Meij. Thank you very much for doing this for us. This is the Rockville concert band, associate music director, and we are so eager to know a little bit more about you and your music. We played back in March last year one of your pieces. For some weird reason, our band hasn't played your music a lot, but some of the musicians did. But everybody felt in love with the downtown divertimento. It was such a great success that everybody wants to know more about yourself, your music, play everything you've written so far, and we're very excited to know about yourself. So if you could please just walk us through your background, your where you come from, and all of that.
Yeah. Well, I was born and raised in Holland, in the Netherlands. And I grew up playing in a local band on trumpet and cornet first, and then I later switched to trombone. I had a full career in music in the Netherlands as a professional trombone player. And besides that, I started to become an arranger first, mostly for wind orchestra, and later a composer. My first big success as a composer was my very first piece, my Symphony No. 1, The Lord of the Rings, which is now a little over 32 years old. It premiered in 1988 in March in Belgium, March 15 in Belgium, and recently we celebrated the 30th anniversary, and I had the honor and the pleasure to conduct the United States Marine Band in Washington, D.C. And you were actually there, right?
Yeah,
at the concert.
It was a fantastic concert, actually.
Yeah, and you can actually share a video with all the band members of that performance, including an interview with Jason Fedek, the commander of the United States Marine Band, about that very first piece, Lord of the Rings. So fast forward, in 2004, I met my wife Diane in New York City. I was there as a player on tour, and that was 16 years ago. Last Friday we celebrated that. In 2007 we got married in Amsterdam, and in 2008 I immigrated to the United States. We have a small apartment in New York City and a large home here in the Hudson Valley near Kingston. The name of the town is Saugerties, New York, but nobody's ever heard of that. It's very close to Woodstock. We're actually on the Hudson. Well, you've been to our place. It's wonderful now. To be in isolation, there are worse places to think about. So that's, in a nutshell, very briefly, where I come from, what I do, what I did.
Yeah.
Now, right now, I don't play anymore. I'm full-time composing, arranging, conducting, teaching, adjudicating a little bit, publish. I started my own publishing company in the same year as the Lord of the Rings premiere, 1988. It's called Amstel Music, so that's also 32 years old now. It's just, I was one of the first self-publishing composers. Now it's very common, but in those days it was not. But so yeah, I've been publishing my own music, have my own CD label for 32 years now. And I'm distributed worldwide through Hal Leonard, a big company from Milwaukee.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard about it.
So yeah, actually I have a couple of questions from the musicians also about that first piece, The Lord of the Ring, of course, the so famous, famous piece. Well, one of the things that they want to know is, how do you remember those months? Because I know that it took almost 3 years to complete the 5 parts of the symphony. How do you remember those months? Was something really intense? So was the relationship with the book something that compelled you directly to go and compose the piece, or how do you remember those days?
Well, I think it was a very good idea to name the piece The Lord of the Rings. So to make the connection as a programmatic work to that book that already was very famous in 1988 or what in the 80s. I actually started reading the books in 1982. So that's 6 years ahead of time, with the sole idea just to make music. So it wasn't that I was a big Tolkien fan and I read the books when I was young. No. I decided to, a friend of mine actually gave me the idea. I talked to him about writing a substantial work, a big work. But I said, I need a theme, you know, I need some leitmotif or whatever. But I said, I want to write a symphony. And then he suggests, well, have you thought about The Lord of the Rings by Tolkien? And I said, no, I have heard of the book. I don't know it, but I will start reading it. And so I did. I bought the 3 volumes. And immediately in the first book, I thought, this is it. And basically, the symphony is actually only about the first book, you know, Lothlorien, A Journey in the Dark. And the first and third and fifth movement are just metaphor musical illustrations of Gandalf, Gollum, and hobbits. Only the last couple of bars is called the Grey Havens, and that's also the last chapter of the last book of Tolkien, of the trilogy. So, yeah, I think if I would have just called it Symphony Number 1 with no subtitle or no program, I don't think it would have become so famous. I think the connection with the book was the best idea. And then later when the movie came in 1999 or 2000, the book became even more famous. And now everybody knows who Gandalf is, you know. So that actually helped quite a bit. The film was actually, I could slipstream on the success of the film.
So actually, one of the musicians was asking why weren't you asked to write the music for the movies? if you would have done that.
In 1996 or 97, I heard about the plans that there was a movie underway. So I found out it was online cinema or something in Australia, Peter Jackson.
Yes.
And I did send a score and a CD to them. But I got a nice answer, a letter saying, thank you very much, but we already have Howard Shore, the composer and of course it had to be a Hollywood guy, you know, not an unknown Dutch composer.
Yeah.
So, but I tried, and it's fine, you know. I'm very happy with it because it really helps my piece as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question about that symphony comes from one of our saxophone players, and he would like to ask you about why did you choose the soprano saxophone for the now so famous theme in the Gollum part, I think it is.
Yeah, it's the third movement. That's this big solo for soprano sax. Well, honestly, there's only one instrument in the wind orchestra range that can come close to imitate Gollum. You know, it's sort of like a cat-like, and he can be very sweet and very mean, and so I can't think of another instrument who could do that. Not an English horn, alto sax, or a trumpet. No, soprano sax. The soprano sax is not a regular instrument in the wind orchestration. It becomes more and more though. Percy Grainger used to use soprano sax in his works, you know, and I like it too. I have written more works with the soprano saxophone as being the top of the saxophone family. So soprano, alto, tenor, bari sax. So the answer is the only instrument who can depict Gollum or imitate Gollum is the soprano saxophone.
Yeah. So there is another person asking something related to that, and it's how do you decide what instrument you score for? I mean, this among all the instruments of the wind band, how do you exactly choose which one are you gonna use for a particular theme? And also with this question comes the other question that if you feel like every instrument has a personality that you choose upon, okay, and now I need this kind of sonority, and I know that, I don't know, the euphonium has this mellow sound personality, and I choose it like that. Do you feel and do you think that these instruments have their own personalities?
Absolutely, yeah. Or instrument groups. I mean, the wind orchestra, that's one of the reasons I write almost strictly for wind orchestra, is that there is such an enormous amount of colors that you can use on your palette, like a painter, you know, in the winds and also in the percussion. So when I compose something, I do not have the instrumentation ready in my head. I usually work, you can't see it, but here below me is my keyboard, my synthesizer. That's just a general orchestral sound, but I still make sketches by hand. I can show you some. This is for the piece I'm working on right now. We'll talk about that a little later. It's called The Painted Bird. So I still, with pen and pencil, I make sketches, and I try them out, and then halfway I think, okay, this is going to be brass, this is going to be winds, or this is going to be a solo instrument. Very important is what key we're in, you know, if it's G minor or D major. Some instruments sound very good in certain keys, or don't sound so good in, like a B major is difficult for intonation, as you know, especially for the brass, but also the woodwinds. So I'm very careful in choosing the right key I'm in, or transpositions and whatnot. And I love to combine certain instruments with each other. I also try not to double too much, you know. You see a lot of, in the easier works, that the horns have exactly the same as the saxophones, and the bari saxophone, the bass clarinet, and the bassoon have exactly the same notes. I don't do that. I give every instrument its own, like you say, like its own character. I mean, the bassoon is not a bass clarinet. I mean, they play in the low register or high. Actually, a high bassoon is something I like very much. I used that a couple of times in Casanova. I used it in my last Symphony No. 5. There's a big bassoon solo up to the high D flat, or even higher. What is it? E flat. So, yeah, I treat every instrument at their best qualities. I sometimes use a flugelhorn instead of a trumpet or a cornet. I use cornets and trumpets. Unfortunately, most people just ignore it. You know, when I write first and second cornet and trumpet 1, 2, and 3, well, most of the time, everybody plays everything on trumpet, which is a mistake, because a cornet is a total different instrument. It's rounder, it's more flexible, it gets closer to the sound of the horns, you know. And you can compare it to the orchestral repertoire. You know, if Stravinsky writes in Petrushka for a cornet, it has to be played on cornet, nothing else. You know, it sounds way different than a trumpet. It's much more direct, etc. So I think I never had a lesson in instrumentation or composition. I'm self-taught, autodidact as we call it. But I learned the most from reading classical scores. And I started doing that already when I was 15 years old. When I just started playing in the band, I became fascinated by classical music, not band music, classical music, orchestral music. And so I studied all the scores I could get my hand on. We had a big library in The Hague, where I was born and where I grew up. And every week I would go get a whole bunch of scores of Stravinsky, of Mahler, of Bruckner, Shostakovich, Dvorak, Vaughan Williams, you name it. I've seen them all. And I've heard them all. I just played the record. Those were the days that we didn't have CDs yet. It was record time, LP. Yeah. I still have like 3,000 basement. So every week I would borrow a different symphony and I would read along with the score. And usually I would only see it once. And I don't think I have a photographic memory, but I have a very good memory of, okay, this is how you score for the horns or the trombones or the strings, etc. Those were my teachers, you know, the classical composers. Mm-hmm. And that's my advice to young composers. They say, Maestro de Meij or Mr. de Meij, but what would be your advice, you know, for a young composer? Well, that's my first advice is study the classics as much as you can, because all the secrets are in those scores, you know, all the tricks of orchestration are already invented and visible and audible.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you already mentioned one reason, but another question that they have is why writing for band? Why not focus on the orchestral repertoire and write music for orchestra only?
I have done several major works for orchestra. My third symphony, Planet Earth, was originally written for orchestra, for the Noord-Nederlands Orkest, the Noord-Nederlands Orchestra, and premiered by them in 2006. I later made a version for wind orchestra because it gets played much more. The third symphony has been played hundreds of times by wind orchestra, but the orchestral version only a couple, dozen times maybe. The other works are transcriptions. So there is a transcription for orchestra by the Lord of the Rings, and that gets played quite a bit. It was not done by myself, but by a very good arranger, Henk de Vlieger, Dutch percussion player, orchestrator. We basically did it together. He put it in finale in, when was it? It was a little before the movie came out. A lot of people told me, Johan, you need an orchestral version because this is going to be big, and they were right. Yeah. So I could not do a program yet like Sibelius or Finale. So I asked Henk to put it back in Sibelius, or in Finale he did. The original score was done in a very old program called Composer, which later became Finale. So anyway, he did it. He reorchestrated the whole thing under my supervision. I had the final say about, okay, this is, I like this, or now put it back in the trombones, or whatever. A beautiful orchestration, and that gets played quite a bit. Then I also have a symphonic version of my Symphony No. 2, The Big Apple, which I made myself. I'm planning on rewriting Symphony No. 4, which is called the Symphony of Songs. It's more like a song cycle, like Mahler. But I haven't done that yet. But it would be very suitable for orchestra as well. It's for mezzo-soprano, wind orchestra, and children's choir. And I have some solo concertos, which are Casanova, my cello concerto, originally for wind orchestra, now also in a version for orchestra. That only got played once. The wind band version gets played all the time, which is great. So it has become a classic for cello and winds. UFO concerto, my euphonium concerto, that you know very well. There's a version for brass band, for wind orchestra. What else? The Windy City Overture, short overture, has 2 versions. Klezmer Classics, an arrangement on klezmer music. I've done 2 versions, and that's about it. But you're right, the majority of my works are for winds, and the reason is that I started as a young boy, like I said, in a wind band when I was 15 years old, and I became fascinated with the sound and the possibilities. And also, if you write for wind orchestra, it's much easier to get a performance. Not only in the Netherlands, everywhere. You know, if you want an orchestra to play your piece, it's much more difficult.
So it's easier. It's easier to be performed if it's written for band. You mean?
Yeah, if it's written for bands are much eager to play new repertoire. They commission much more. Orchestras are much more conservative. They rather play the Brahms and the Beethovens and not the Meij from Holland that nobody's heard of. Mm-hmm. And that's not only my complaint. I know from a lot of other composers, like Joe Mackey. You know, he's now a star in the wind orchestra world. He started out as an orchestral composer, and he had trouble too getting his works performed.
Yeah.
And now, man, everybody plays John Mackey. Everybody.
Yeah.
So
well, I've watched a video where John Mackey said at the beginning that he wasn't actually a fan of the band Sam. He was actually convinced by Eric Wilder also to
really,
yeah.
Right, exactly.
Because at the beginning, and he explained it really honestly, he said, well, I didn't feel like the band was going to give me what I wanted. So he was really focused on the orchestral work.
Yes,
But thank God he changed his mentality. Yeah. Anyway, another...
I'm afraid to say that being known as a band composer how do you say that? Send off a lot of people that are have a prejudice about band music. You know, they only think, oh, that's John Philip Sousa marches. You know, they have no idea how many beautiful works there are on a very artistic level in the wind band literature nowadays.
No.
So I've had that several times. You know, when I was trying to push one of my works with an orchestra, and I don't get even an answer because they know it's a band guy. You know, it's marches and polkas. Okay. But you know better, and there's still the elite of the orchestra is still a problem for band composers like me.
Yeah. So another question from the musicians is actually about your arrangements, and is what do you find the most challenging part of doing an arrangement from orchestra to band?
Well, to get all the string parts in the wind instruments can be a problem. You know, especially the high violin parts, you cannot put everything in the piccolo or the flutes. So in that sense, you have to be very creative how to reorchestrate things. And sometimes you will lose an octave. That's inevitable. Or certain effects like tremolos, you know. There are some tricks to imitate that sound, but you'll never get the true sound of a tremolo or a pizzicato. I usually use the harp. I've made some arrangements of classical compositions that do not have a harp in the original, like, for instance, the Dvorak, the American Suite. But I use the harp as an extra color, and the harp can do a perfect pizzicato, you know. So yeah, it's plucking a string or several strings at the same time. Yeah, it's easier to go from wind orchestra to orchestra, much easier, because you get this wonderful full string orchestra with cellos and basses and viola. The only thing you have to do is reorchestrate the winds, and you will lose the euphoniums and the saxophones. Well, that's not the end of the world.
Well,
well, I'm joking because we're both euphonium players, but
yeah, absolutely. We don't want to lose the euphonium part ever. So another question: do you feel like you have a piece that has been not well recognized? Something that you think, well, I wrote this piece, I think it's amazing, but nobody's playing it for some reason.
Well, there are a few works that doesn't get much play, but that I like very much. One of them is called Cloud Factory. It's a little more contemporary than my usual stuff. It's about an iron factory in Holland. And I actually have the orchestra and especially the percussion produce those sounds. I can probably send you a link to a recording. It's a great piece. It's and there's no tune. It's written. It's almost like a percussion concerto. You need at least 8 players, and they use anything you can find that makes a noise. The thunder sheets and drum breaks. The orchestral players are using aluminum foil to make little cracking sounds. They're using empty soda cans, and that's a great effect. So I'll send you a recording link, and you can share it with,
I don't think I've ever heard of this.
No. Then there's a piece called Wind Power. that I liked very much. The Venetian collection is a 4 movements work, quite difficult. It's based on the four paintings in the Guggenheim Museum in Venice. So it's sort of descriptive, abstract. 50 Shades of E is a recent work. It's quite hard, but a fun piece to play. But other than that, most of the other works gets played quite a bit. Especially Lord of the Rings, T-Bone Concerto gets a lot of play, down to the Divertimento. And some of my arrangements, like the Jazz Suite, the number 2 by Shostakovich, Jupiter Hymn by Holst. So, yeah, I have some very successful arrangements and composition, and not all of them. But that's normal. I mean, there are a lot of pieces by Stravinsky that nobody knows or likes. So
yeah.
You can't always write a hit.
Talking about the Downtown Divertimento, since it's a piece that we played and everybody loved it. We learned where you got the inspiration in New York City to write the three movements. Can you recall when you wrote that piece? Was that actually commissioned, or was something that you wanted?
It wasn't commissioned.
Okay.
It was not a specific request that they said, well, you have to write something about New York City. It was my own idea, and they accepted it. I like to make the comparison with An American in Paris, you know, George Gershwin. Well, this is a simple version of A Dutchman in New York. It's me living, then I lived on 7th Avenue between 24th and 25th. So that's 3 blocks away from the dog park, you know, what's the first movement is the dog park. I would walk there every day with our doggie Alice, a yellow lab. She's unfortunately not with us anymore. But I would go there every day to let her out, and she would play with the other dogs. And I came up with that simple sort of whistling tune, you know, yum, da, da, dum.
It's amazing. It gets stuck in your head. My wife, I remember my wife telling me, "Stop whistling that. It's just way too much." It's amazing how it gets.
Very simple, but happy, and you know, and I made it up while I was walking back and forth to the dog park. So the second move.
I remember at the beginning trying to explain everybody that you have to feel that the walk just began, because it's so easy to see the beginning. That I try to explain. It's not a 6/8 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2. It's more like and the walk just began, you know, and
you don't walk 1 2 notes.
So I make a lot.
The same happens in the last movement. That's me running the high line, and that's that's exactly the groove in which I was running.
Yeah, nice.
And that's I broke my leg 3 years ago, and I'm still recovering from that. So I haven't been jogging since March of 2017, unfortunately, but I'll come back to that hopefully soon. Then the second movement is just next to the dog park is the Flatiron Building, beautiful landmark of New York City. So for that movement, I chose a sort of a Copland-esque theme with open fifths and open fourth. And so yeah, that's it. Just 3 impressions from New York City, from an immigrant, a Dutch guy in New York.
Mm-hmm.
It has some similarities to my second symphony, which is also based on New York, the Big Apple.
Big Apple.
And number 2, the subtitle is A New York Symphony, and that's also very much inspired by the busy life of New York City. Mm-hmm. You know, the 24/7 economy. Well, not right now, but the rush. You know, the anxiety, the anger. It's all in that piece. It's much more minimalistic than other works that I've written. Mm-hmm. But that also gets played quite a bit. And I just did, in January, I did the orchestral version in Holland with the Noord-Nederlands Orchestra, same orchestra who commissioned number 3. And boy, that was a blast. It really works well for orchestra as well, I must say.
Great, great. So I learned about you and your work when I was still living in Spain, and now I would like to ask you a little bit about your relationship with my home country, with Spain. When was the first time you were there? I know that you've conducted many of the biggest bands there, and I would like you to say something about Spain.
Well, as you know, better than anyone else, Spain has an incredible culture for wind orchestras, probably maybe the best in the world. I mean, the level of playing and the excitement for wind music is fantastic. My friend Henry Adams, who's a Dutch conductor, he moved to Spain in same year as Lord of the Rings came out, 1988, and he became the director of La Artística Unión, or the Feos, as they were called, the uglies. In Spain, as you know, there are, in every small town, in many occasions, there are 2 bands, and they're competing like hell. So in Buñol, which is in the Valencia area, there's the Feos and the Litros. Feos is the uglies, and the Litros are the leaders, the drinkers.
The drinkers.
They still drinkers, the beer drinkers. Same in Holland, in Thorn, a small town in the south. We have the Bokken and the Geiten. Those are 2 nicknames for the goats and I don't know what the Bokken are, but also an animal. And in IJsden near Maastricht in Holland, there's the blue and the red. The bleu and the rouille in dialect. So, but in Spain, it's very common that there are 2 phenomenal bands in one town. Anyway, when Henry moved to Spain, the first thing he did was programming my Symphony No. 1, Lord of the Rings. And it was played outside in Auditorium San Luis, which is a huge outdoor auditorium in Buñol. It holds 4,500 people. And it was sold out, and it was an amazing success. So I was invited. I still lived in Holland then, so I flew to Valencia. And since then, I've been numerous times to Spain. Not only to go to Buñol, Henry premiered almost all my works in Buñol, my T-Bone Concerto, Big Apple, you name it. Symphony No. 4, he hasn't done No. 5 yet. That's still to come. He's not with La Artística anymore. He just lost his job like a year ago. But that's another story. Yeah. Besides that, I've been to Spain. I've been invited many times. I've worked with professional groups like the Banda Municipal de Barcelona, Banda Municipal de Bilbao, the Banda Municipal de Vitoria-Gasteiz. I recorded a CD in Oviedo, at the conservatorium in Oviedo. That's where you're from, right? From that region,
really close.
Asturias or Galicia?
My mom is from Galicia.
It's in the north. Yeah, Oviedo. And I've been to many other places like Altea, Lalín, Madrid, Tomayoso, you name it. I love Spain. I love the mentality. I love the people. I love the food. Right now, I'm actually learning Spanish because I have so much time on my hand. La próxima vez on habla español, okay?
Okay, next time we'll do it in Spanish for them. Yeah. Okay, only a couple of more questions. One is about your favorite composers, who you look at, or have you enjoyed all your life?
Well, I already mentioned them. You know, when I said about score study, my top 10 would be Giacomo Puccini, Igor Stravinsky, Aaron Copland, Leonard Bernstein, Antonin Dvorak, Carl Nielsen, Sergei Prokofiev, Dmitri Shostakovich, John Adams, John Williams. That's 10. But I can go on with another 10 easily. Vaughan Williams, Elgar. I mean, Mahler. I love classical music, and there's so much amazing works. And in the wind orchestra world, I have a couple of heroes as well. Alfred Reed, John Mackey, Eric Whittaker, Frank Ticali. Some of my European friends like Jan van der Roost, Philip Spark, Otto Schwartz, Ferre Ferran from Spain. Many great composers who now mainly write wind orchestra music. So to be honest, my biggest inspiration is still the classical music, 19th century, 20th century classical orchestral music. That's my biggest go-to source. Yeah.
And what are your thoughts about the current situation? What's going on? What's going to happen in the next few months? Is the classical or the band world going to change? Are we seeing now the changes in the repertoire that we always said that the orchestral world would need to do? How do you see this scary moment for a lot of people?
Yeah, well, I hope that it will all go away, because all the virtual concertos that people are organizing, I mean, it's not a real thing, you know. You're sitting at home by yourself, and then you appear with 40 other people on the screen. It's hard to make a balance. So I hope when the COVID-19 is over, that everything will come back to normal, the economy, a normal life. But it will take another couple of months, and my fear is that it may come back, you know, by October or November, when the weather gets colder again. There's a good chance that it will come back, but hopefully we'll have a vaccine then. But yeah, it will cost us all. I mean, it hurts everybody. It will cost us all a year of our life. I mean, I had a full agenda for this year. It's completely wiped out. I've been home for 8 weeks now. But I'm optimistic, you know. I'm writing this whole piece. I have many other things to do. Learn Spanish. Do exercise every day. We cook well.
Do you think that there will be? Do you think that there will be more opportunities to write new music, since it seems like we might have to go back with smaller ensembles at the beginning? They think that the full bands or the full orchestra, maybe we need even more music, writing more for chamber music.
Yeah, well, I'm not going back to writing for smaller ensembles for that reason, because it will all come back. Not this year, or hopefully by autumn or December, that we can go back to normal performances. But this has not been inspiring. You know, this whole, the first month, I was sort of paralyzed. I couldn't do anything. I was not inspired. I had no energy. I was just depressed. Right now I feel much better. But people have asked me, is this an inspiring period for you? No, it's not at all. Not at all. I have much more time, but this was not inspirational. It's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. And I miss the travels, you know. I was going to Mexico for 4 concerts in July. October, Uruguay canceled, 3 concerts in Japan, a couple of concerts in the United States. Most of them, fortunately, will be postponed to next year. The ones in Japan, 1 concert in April has been moved to, in Buffalo, New York, has been moved to October. So hopefully everything will be back to normal and we can do whatever we missed this year. And some things were just canceled, festivals that will not come back. But you know, I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic. It will go away, but nobody knows when and at what price. But it will go away. I promise.
Well, the last question is, some of the musicians would like to know if you would be our guest conductor one day.
Absolutely, would love to come down. Yes.
Good.
I don't know the band, but I'm sure it will be wonderful. And yeah, let's do that.
Let's do it. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for
Okay.
all these questions and everything. Is
Un
there
placer.
un placer. Is there anything that you
It was
want
a
to
great
share?
pleasure. No, I just want to say, Juan became friends like 6, 7 years ago.
Yes.
When you were living in the same area in the Hudson Valley, and we've become great friends. He played euphonium in the New York Wind Symphony under my baton, and he helped me planning a trip to Spain 2 years ago, which was fantastic, and we have plans for the future as well. So this has been a great friendship, and
Absolutely.
we'll continue to do so. And
Absolutely.
certainly with the Rockville Concert Band, that will be a great experience, and I can't wait to see you all.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Maestro.